The light came through the stained glass windows of the great synagogue in Warsaw every Friday evening, painting the faces of families in amber and blue. Children sat beside their grandparents, listening to ancient prayers sung in voices that had echoed the same words for centuries. Outside, the cobblestone streets of Nalewki hummed with life. Vendors calling out prices, scholars debating Talmud in courtyards, mothers buying bread for Shabbat dinner. It was 1938, and they had no idea that within 7 years, nearly every person in that synagogue would be dead. This is not a story about numbers, though the numbers are unthinkable. 6 million Jews murdered, along with millions of others deemed unworthy of life by a regime that transformed hatred into industrial-scale death. This is a story about what happens when humanity crosses a threshold it can never uncross. When a nation decides that some people are not people at all, and when the world watches and does almost nothing. Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany on January 30, 1933. Within weeks, the first concentration camp opened at Dachau, initially for political prisoners, communists, socialists, anyone who opposed the Nazi regime. But the seeds of something far darker had already been planted. Hitler's ideology, laid out in Mein Kampf, was clear. Jews were a cancer in the body of the German people, a race of subhumans responsible for Germany's defeat in World War I, for economic collapse, for moral decay. It was a lie, but it was a lie that millions chose to believe. The persecution began slowly, methodically. April 1, 1933, a nationwide boycott of Jewish businesses. Brown-shirted stormtroopers stood outside shops, painting stars of David on windows, warning Germans not to buy from Jews. September 15, 1935, the Nuremberg laws. Jews were stripped of citizenship, forbidden to marry non-Jews, excluded from public life. November 9, 1938, Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. Synagogues burned across Germany and Austria. Jewish homes and businesses were destroyed. 91 Jews were murdered. 30,000 Jewish men were arrested and sent to concentration camps. The world condemned it, and then moved on. In a small apartment in Berlin, a 15-year-old girl named Edith Stein sat by the window, watching smoke rise from the synagogue 3 blocks away. Her father, a lawyer, had already lost his job. Her brother had been beaten on his way home from school. Her mother was packing a suitcase, trying to decide what you take when you don't know if you're ever coming back. Edith wrote in her diary that night, "They say we are less than human. I don't understand. I still cry when I'm hurt. I still laugh when something is funny. How can I be less than human when I feel everything a human feels?" By 1942, Edith Stein would be dead in Auschwitz. Her diary would survive. When Germany invaded Poland on September 1, 1939, it set in motion a plan that had been years in the making. The Einsatzgruppen, mobile killing squads, followed the Wehrmacht into Poland, then into the Soviet Union, rounding up Jews in villages and towns, forcing them into ditches and shooting them. Men, women, children, one bullet at a time. At Babi Yar, outside Kyiv, over 33,000 Jews were murdered in 2 days in September 1941. At Ponary, near Vilnius, 100,000 people were shot and buried in pits. At Rumbula, outside Riga, 25,000 Jews were killed in the forest over 2 days. The killers were ordinary men, police officers, reservists, clerks and shopkeepers in uniform. Some refused, most did not. Historians have studied this extensively, how ordinary people become executioners. The answer is chilling in its simplicity: obedience, peer pressure, desensitization, and the dehumanization of victims. When you're told someone isn't human, it becomes easier to kill them. But bullets were inefficient. They were messy, slow, and psychologically taxing on the killers. The Nazis wanted something cleaner, something industrial. On January 20th, 1942, 15 high-ranking Nazi officials gathered at a villa in Wannsee, a suburb of Berlin, for a meeting that would last 90 minutes. It was chaired by Reinhard Heydrich, head of the Reich Security Main Office. The purpose of the meeting was simple: coordinate the final solution to the Jewish question, the systematic murder of every Jew in Europe. The minutes of the meeting, meticulously recorded, are among the most chilling documents in history. They discuss logistics, transportation, efficiency. They use euphemisms: evacuation, resettlement, special treatment. But everyone in that room knew what they meant: murder, all of it. The machinery of genocide was already being built. Auschwitz-Birkenau, Treblinka, Sobibor, Belzec, Chelmno, Majdanek. Death factories. Trains arrived daily, packed with families who had been told they were being relocated for work. They stepped off onto selection platforms, where SS doctors decided their fates in seconds. To the left, slave labor, temporary survival. To the right, the gas chambers, immediate death. Dr. Josef Mengele, the angel of death, stood on that platform at Auschwitz, whistling opera as he decided who would live and who would die. Children were almost always sent to the right. The elderly, the sick, the weak, to the right. Mothers who refused to leave their children, to the right. Rudolf Höss, the commandant of Auschwitz, later testified that the camp could kill 10,000 people a day during peak operation. The process was horrifically efficient. Victims were told they were going to shower and delouse. They were ordered to undress, to fold their clothes neatly so they could find them later. They were herded into chambers disguised as shower rooms. The doors were sealed. Zyklon B pellets, a cyanide-based pesticide, were dropped through vents in the ceiling. Within 15 minutes, everyone inside was dead. Steady, purposeful pacing with clear forward momentum. Not slow, not fast. Every line feels intentional, disciplined, and moving forward. Sonderkommando units, prisoners forced to work in the crematoria under threat of death, removed the bodies, searched them for gold teeth, cut the hair from women's heads to be used for textiles, and loaded the corpses into ovens. The ashes were dumped into pits or scattered in nearby rivers. Entire families erased. No graves, no names, no trace. Among the Sonderkommando at Auschwitz was a man named Zalman Grodowski, a Polish Jew who had been forced into this unimaginable work. He knew he would not survive, but he refused to let the truth die with him. Grodowski wrote detailed accounts of what he witnessed, rolled them into bottles, and buried them near the crematoria. He wrote, "Dear finder of these notes, I have one request of you, that my days of hell, that my hopeless tomorrow will find a purpose in the future. I want our suffering to be not in vain. I want it to be a lesson." In October 1944, Grodowski was killed during a Sonderkommando uprising, a desperate doomed revolt in which prisoners destroyed one of the crematoria before being gunned down. His manuscripts were found after the war, buried in the soil of Auschwitz. They are now in the archives of the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum. His words survived. His name is remembered. Not everyone died in the camps. Some were worked to death in slave labor. At IG Farben's Buna Monowitz plant, prisoners built synthetic rubber factories, beaten, starved, collapsing from exhaustion. Primo Levi, an Italian chemist who survived Auschwitz, wrote in If This Is a Man, "Imagine a man who is deprived of everyone he loves and at the same time of his house, his habits, his clothes, everything he possesses. He will be a hollow man, reduced to suffering and needs, forgetful of dignity and restraint. He will be a man whose life or death can be lightly decided, with no sense of human affinity." It is in this way that one can understand the double sense of the term extermination camp, and it is now clear what we seek to express with the phrase, "to lie on the bottom." The Nazis didn't just want to kill, they wanted to destroy identity, dignity, humanity itself. They shaved heads, tattooed numbers, stripped names. Prisoners became Häftlinge, inmates, numbers, objects. But even in that hell, humanity persisted. Prisoners shared scraps of bread, whispered prayers, sang songs in secret. They remembered birthdays, told stories, held on to memory, because memory was resistance. Children were not spared. Over 1.5 million Jewish children were murdered during the Holocaust. At Auschwitz, Dr. Mengele conducted grotesque medical experiments on twins, injecting dyes into their eyes to see if he could change their color, sewing siblings together to create conjoined twins, infecting them with diseases to study their progression. Most died in agony. At Theresienstadt, a transit camp in Czechoslovakia used as Nazi propaganda, children drew pictures, images of homes they'd lost, parents they'd never see again, dreams of freedom. 15,000 children passed through Theresienstadt. Fewer than 100 survived. Their drawings remain in the archives, fragile, fading scraps of paper that scream in silence. And yet, even in the darkest places, there were those who resisted. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising in April 1943, when starving, desperate Jews rose up with smuggled weapons against the Nazi war machine. They held out for nearly a month. The Nazis burned the ghetto block by block. When it was over, 13,000 Jews had been killed. The survivors were deported to Treblinka. But they had fought. They had refused to die quietly. Mordecai Anielewicz, the 24-year-old commander of the uprising, wrote in his final letter, "My life's dream has been realized. I have lived to see Jewish resistance in the ghetto in all its greatness and glory." He died in the ruins, weapon in hand. The world knew. Reports reached the Allies as early as 1942. Jan Karski, a Polish resistance fighter, infiltrated the Warsaw Ghetto and a transit camp, then traveled to London and Washington to report what he had seen. He met with British Foreign Secretary Anthony Eden, with U.S. Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter, with President Franklin Roosevelt. Karski told them Jews were being exterminated, systematically, millions. Frankfurter famously replied, "I did not say that you are lying. I said I cannot believe you." The Allies did not bomb the railway lines to Auschwitz. They did not prioritize rescuing Jews. They focused on winning the war. And while they fought, the trains kept running. By 1944, the Nazis knew they were losing, but the killing accelerated. In Hungary, 437,000 Jews were deported to Auschwitz in just 8 weeks between May and July 1944. The crematoria couldn't keep up. Bodies were burned in open pits. the sky over Auschwitz turned black with smoke. Survivors described the smell, a sickly, sweet stench that clung to everything, that you could taste in your throat, that never went away. Liberation came slowly. Soviet forces reached Majdanek in July 1944, the first major camp liberated. They found gas chambers intact, crematoria still warm, warehouses filled with shoes, glasses, human hair. The world began to see the evidence. But it wasn't until the spring of 1945, when American and British troops entered camps in Germany, that the full scope became undeniable. At Bergen-Belsen, British soldiers found 60,000 prisoners, most of them starving, diseased, barely alive. 13,000 unburied corpses lay scattered across the camp. Soldiers vomited at the sight. Hardened officers wept. One British soldier later recalled, "I had seen men die in war, but this was something different. This was hell with the lid off." At Buchenwald, Dachau, Mauthausen, the same scenes. Living skeletons, mass graves, the machinery of death laid bare. General Dwight D. Eisenhower visited the camps and ordered extensive documentation, photographs, films, testimonies. He said, "Let the world see, let them know, so that this can never happen again." When the war ended, the survivors faced a new horror. Many returned to their hometowns to find their families dead, their homes occupied, their communities erased. In Kielce, Poland, in July 1946, a pogrom killed 42 Jewish Holocaust survivors who had returned home. Even after liberation, Jews were not safe. Many survivors ended up in displaced persons camps, waiting, sometimes for years, for somewhere, anywhere to take them in. Countries closed their borders. Immigration quotas remained tight. The world had wept for them, but it did not open its doors. The Nuremberg Trials began in November 1945. 24 major Nazi leaders were prosecuted for crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide, a term coined specifically to describe what had been done to the Jews of Europe. 12 were sentenced to death, but thousands of perpetrators escaped justice. Some fled to South America, others melted into post-war Europe, assuming new identities. Adolf Eichmann, the architect of deportations, was captured in Argentina in 1960 by Israeli agents and brought to trial in Jerusalem. He claimed he was just following orders. Hannah Arendt, covering the trial, coined the phrase, "the banality of evil," the idea that monstrous acts can be committed by ordinary bureaucratic people who simply stop thinking about the meaning of what they're doing. Eichmann was hanged in 1962. His ashes were scattered at sea, outside Israeli waters, so that no land would bear the trace of him. Survivors carried their trauma for the rest of their lives. Elie Wiesel, who survived Auschwitz and Buchenwald, spent decades writing about the Holocaust, determined to bear witness. He wrote in Night, "Never shall I forget that night, the first night in camp, which has turned my life into one long night. Never shall I forget those flames which consumed my faith forever. Never shall I forget that nocturnal silence which deprived me for all eternity of the desire to live." Primo Levi survived Auschwitz, but struggled for decades with depression and survivor guilt. In 1987, he died in an apparent suicide. His last words to a friend were, "I don't know if I can go on." The Holocaust didn't end in 1945. It echoed through generations, in nightmares, in silence, in the empty chairs at family tables. Today, there are fewer than 100,000 Holocaust survivors still alive. Soon, there will be none. The last living witnesses to humanity's darkest chapter will be gone. which is why memory must become our responsibility. There are those who deny the Holocaust happened, who claim it is exaggerated, fabricated, a conspiracy. They are wrong. The evidence is overwhelming. The testimonies are consistent. The documents are preserved. 6 million Jews murdered, along with millions of Roma, disabled people, Poles, Soviet prisoners of war, political dissidents, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, all deemed unworthy of life by a regime built on hatred. But denial persists, and so must remembrance. Auschwitz still stands, not as it was. The crematoria were blown up by the Nazis in a desperate attempt to hide the evidence. But the barracks remain, the train tracks, the gate with its obscene slogan, Arbeit macht frei, work sets you free. 1 million people visit each year. They walk the paths prisoners walked, stand in the gas chambers, see the mounds of human hair behind glass. They leave in silence, because there are no words. The Holocaust was not an accident of history. It was a choice, made by leaders who believed in racial supremacy, enabled by citizens who followed orders, who looked away, who convinced themselves it wasn't their problem. It could not have happened without railways that kept running, factories that kept producing, bureaucrats who kept filing paperwork. It could not have happened without neighbors who informed on neighbors, who took over abandoned homes, who pretended not to notice the smoke. And it could not have happened without a world that knew and did not act. But the Holocaust also revealed something else about humanity. Acts of resistance, of courage, of impossible compassion. Righteous among the nations, non-Jews who risked their lives to save Jews. Oskar Schindler, the German industrialist who saved over 1,200 Jews by employing them in his factories. Irena Sendler, a Polish social worker who smuggled 2,500 Jewish children out of the Warsaw Ghetto. Raoul Wallenberg, a Swedish diplomat who issued protective passports to tens of thousands of Hungarian Jews. Chiune Sugihara, a Japanese consul in Lithuania who issued thousands of visas against orders, allowing Jews to escape to Japan. And countless others whose names we will never know. They proved that even in the darkest moments, humanity is a choice. The survivors who lived carried their stories forward, not for revenge, but for remembrance. Elie Wiesel said, "To forget the dead would be akin to killing them a second time." Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz, wrote Man's Search for Meaning, arguing that even in the camps, people had the freedom to choose how they responded to suffering, to preserve their inner dignity, their humanity, even when everything else was taken. He wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." We live in a world where genocide has happened again. Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia, Darfur. The lesson of never again has been repeated and violated, because humanity has not yet learned what the Holocaust should have taught us, that hatred, left unchallenged, grows, that dehumanization is the first step toward atrocity, that silence is complicity. The Holocaust was the limit of humanity, the absolute boundary of what human beings are capable of inflicting on one another. But it was also a mirror, reflecting our capacity for cruelty, yes, but also our capacity for courage, for resistance, for memory. The question it leaves us with is simple and unbearable. What would you have done? Would you have resisted, hidden someone, spoken up, or would you have looked away? We tell ourselves we would have been heroes, but history tells us most people were not. Most people followed orders. Most people stayed silent. And that is the most terrifying truth of all. There is a Jewish tradition. When someone dies, you place a stone on their grave. It says, "I was here. I remembered." At Auschwitz, visitors leave stones by the crematoria. Thousands of stones, millions, each a refusal to forget. If this story moved you, if it made you remember the names that time tried to erase, subscribe and help us keep their legacy alive. Because when memory dies, history repeats. And we cannot let that happen. Not again.